contribute very much making this happen. It has been years that I had not been here. And Kazi has told that my soft spot and love with Bangladesh, because I had first steps of my success in the Aga Khan Award for Architecture in here. So I actually would not call myself a lecturer, more of a gossiper. So we'll do some gossips on architecture, and it should be substantiated with good ideas, I presume. Before going into that, I thank Abul Khair, the chairman of the institute and foundation, and my dear friends here, Saiful Haq and Qazi Ashraf, and they have been there since the outset. So when we came here in 1984, there was a tripartite animosity. And there were three groups of people. They just loved to hate each other. And I had to do something. I had to do something to bring them together, because award's idea or love for architecture should bring them together. You know what I did? I asked them, what do you want from me? You know what they said? Bring Paul Rudolph. I never knew him, you know. I said, okay, I'll bring him. I went to the editor of Architectural Record, Mildred Schmertz. I said, Mildred, please do a favor for me. I'll do whatever you like. I can polish your shoes forever. And, and we want Paul Rudolph to come to Dhaka to our seminar. She said she could try. Just in a couple of hours or a day, she said that he's willing to come. Apparently, he's building in Jakarta. He'd love to see Dhaka, because Dhaka has been pioneering in architecture under the leadership of Mossar al-Islam. You know, from Stanley Tigerman to Louis Kahn, you know, many people contributed to architecture here. So he knew it, and I promised, and I even kept his very private phone number. He only gave to Mildred and a couple of friends, but I never called him. But he came here and we had the seminar. And then I fell in love with Bangladesh and its people. So that is the introduction. And, you know, this one world, we don't have a second one. And we are wasting its resources, especially ourselves as architects, 40% of it, non-renewable resources, every year. These are sort of cliche kind of statements, but it's always worth remembering. In order to have the same comfort level of the world's population at the level of United States and Western Europe, we need to have 5 of these worlds. So what happens that we paid the cost by being underprivileged in the less developed areas of the world. And that is how the reality, and architecture or construction, I should say at large, has a substantial proportion of this underprivileged position of the world's resources. And then I want to go into the communism, the previous century, where I lived almost 5 years more than the half of it. 20th century has based itself into polarities. It was basically animosities and oppositions, so that the political will of some forces could be kept. So these were the West versus East, capitalism versus communism, developed, underdeveloped, blue versus red, north, south, conservative, progressive, right versus left. And with this sort of tension of oppositions, the whole century was wasted. Whole century was wasted until we came in 1968. We said, let us be reasonable and ask for the impossible. This is the motto of the French Revolution in Paris. And it was a big upheaval of the youth. Fortunately, there was only one accidental death, but it was rather strong opposition, but completely new values were developed. These were the values of participation, plurality, freedom, non-discrimination, equality, peace in every respect. And now, today, we enjoy a political atmosphere, not 100% all over the world. You know, I'm not condoning the realities that we go through every day. But if anyone is against these values of humanity, as opposed to the previous list of polarities, would be taken to the lunatic hospital right away. You know, who would be against people's participation to their future? Who would be against plurality of existence? Who would be against freedom and whatever? And architectural discourse, of course, got its share from that, and substantially from that. And the institution that I ran for 25 years was one of the pioneering ones. And I previously mentioned the values of the 1968 upheaval. Then green, conservation, sustainability, partnership, sharing, and ecology added to these things. And the whole climate of the architectural scene has changed. Again, not 100%. But the values were replaced for values for the sustenance of the globe, for the sparing of the resources, using of the natural energies, and not to have anything that cannot be, or to have the most of the things that can be recycled. And then we go to the world of accomplishments. You know, we have two polarities, science and arts. And science is very simple. It searches for the validity, determination, but innovation is impossible for the progress. But in order for a scientific discourse to be valid, it has to determine and it has to be valid what it proposes. Whereas in arts, important thing is originality. If it is not original, then it doesn't have value. And both of these have innovation as the factor for progress. And design, including architectural design, has all of these. So we have a profession. On one hand, we are talking about the validity by scientific discourse. On the other hand, we are talking about innovation or originality by the artistic discourse. And design, of course, has unlimited possibilities for forms and functions. And since Marcus Vitruvius' Polio, the dictum of architecture did not change. It was simply firmness, commodity, and delight. It has to be sound, it has to be delightful or beautiful, and it has to serve a function. And since then, the architectural enterprises, whatever accomplishments were made, had to be judged according to this tripartite solutions. And one cannot say that this part is important, the other part is not, because it has to be firm and standing. It has to reflect the beauties of the era or the period when it was built. And of course, it has to serve a function. And I have never seen any other profession than architecture defined in various different forms. I have never seen a medical doctor or a lawyer saying that the law is this or not that, or medicine is this or that. Every profession very clearly knows what they're doing, except us. I have an anthology. Next time I come here, I'll share it with you. 300 different quotations what architecture is. I'll share the old ones with you. Of course, architecture is order. If architecture is not there, it's chaos. And Victor Hugo says that without great ideas, architecture is the greatest ideas of the human race. And Friedrich Nietzsche says architecture is a sort of oratory powered by meanings and forms. And Emerson says, brevity of human life gives a melancholy to the profession of the architect. And William Shakespeare says that people are the city. He just ignores the total hardware from the Coriolanus. And Thomas Edison says that in creativity, the important thing is perspiration, not so much inspiration. He points out the hard work. And Michelangelo Buonarroti says that beauty is the simplification or purgation of the superfluities, as he says that he is taking the unnecessary parts out in order to present whatever his sculpture is. And of course, the famous saying by Schelling, architecture is the music in space, as if it's a frozen music. And then Richard England makes a sort of joke to that, and he says that then music should be molten or melted architecture, and it goes on. And Johann von Goethe also makes an analogy with the music as the source of it. And Brancusi calls it an inhabited sculpture. And Louis Kahn is the way of reaching out for the truth. And Justus Stein then mentions that architecture, transportation of the mental substance into material dimensions. And Emilio Ambas says that every act of architecture is defiance with nature. So he is some kind of early naturalists of architecture, or propagator of the Green Revolution, where he said that we put something and then we take something out of the nature. And that is an ontology that we shall probably have a chance to go through that and even have some laugh about it. And then we come to validation of architecture. So like any profession, you know, it is very well known in every profession the accomplishments are measured by certain criteria, which is almost easily determinable. Where architecture, it doesn't really work like that. And there are sort of propagators of the ideas or accomplishments as the institutions like chambers of architects, institutes of architects, and whatever. But first time, a validation of architecture came by Pritzker Foundation, but in a very strange way. It is not to validate or celebrate architecture, but the architect. The idea to the Pritzker family, at that time, J. Pritzker was alive, and was given by Philip Johnson. And Philip Johnson, winning the first Pritzker Award, everyone said that, oh, Philip persuaded him to an award and he got it himself. And first cycle was rather sort of taken up with a pinch of salt. And it was $100,000 then. It was a huge amount of money for 1979, which is almost, don't forget, the years when Aga Khan was also establishing his own award for architecture on completely different grounds. But second one went to Luis Barragan. And then we all said, wow, this is a different kind of world. It validates or celebrates architecture in a wider realm that nobody has ever recognized Luis Barragan. And following that, Kenzo Tange wins the award, one of the most celebrated architects of the late modern movement. And then Jim Sterling, who had a new touch and new interpretation of the modern architecture, especially in English style. And with these successive winning personalities, Pritzker Award established a tremendous clout and credibility for itself. But there was also little pitfalls on the negative side. For instance, nobody has known, except some of the few people of my generation, Kevin Roche was the greatest architect of the 1982. But he got the award, and there was some criticism about that. I always very much loved this Ford Foundation building in 42nd Street at the east side. It was a delightful building. And then IMP, as you can see, I picked up some examples from them after they winning the award. You know, IMP won the award in 1983. This is a competition of or entry and the realized project in Qatar Islamic Museum in almost in 2000, early 2000. And Richard Mayer was the youngest of the Pritzker Prize. I think he still could be considered as the youngest to accomplish that. But as you can see, Pritzker is always picking up some kind of a alternative voice in the architectural scene. And Hans Hollein and the following Gottfried Böhm, and they were particularly noticed by the American and the wider world through Pritzker Awards. They were rather well known in Europe, but not to that extent. And in 1988, Pritzker Award was divided into two. And they must have afraid that they may lose both of them. And they gave the award to Oskar Niemeyer and Gordon Bunshaft, half and half. And Gordon Bunshaft, a couple of years later, died. And Oskar Niemeyer, thank God, lived until last year. So, and they were also, the Pritzker people were criticized in the media, saying that why half, you know, don't they deserve independently an award or not? And of course, the big hit came with Frank Gehry, and Frank Gehry, at that time in 1989, didn't particularly have any major buildings, but a couple of sort of courageous sort of architectural accomplishments. But Pritzker gave him the award, especially what he had done in Vitra in Germany. And Pritzker gave the award to Aldo Rossi just a couple of years before he died in an accident. And then they celebrated the postmodern movement. And they got on the bandwagon of postmodern movement and gave the award to Robert Venturi a year after. And Robert Venturi made a very strong point that his wife, Denise Scott Brown, should have been mentioned. And Alvaro Siza, after the liberation of Portugal, he got a chance to have better practice, and you know, he was rather a persecuted person politically in old Salazar regime in Portugal. Then he was known and as an international renown as well. And following that, Fumihiko Maki has got his award, and following Fumihiko's first very well-deserved award, Christian de Portzampak got the award. Again, that was a particular source of criticism because many of the architectural critics thought that Portzampak was not at the caliber of the previous, many previous winners. And of course, Tadao Ando, with his poetic concrete structures and simplicity and sublime beauty of the simple structures and the poetic spaces, was very well received. And more or less his diametrically opposite attitude from the Harvard professor Rafael Muneo, who was talking about contextuality, also got 19 96 awards. So I am trusting on your patience. I'll go all through these characters because this award has been always judged by the architectural public as the award for the usual suspects. And people bet now, next one who will be, and try to get ideas. And I will tell if I bet it, I could have won with which one. And Sverre Fehn, the Norwegian architect, he is the leading modernist from Norway, and he has got the award just a couple of years before his demise. And Renzo Piano has got the award from at the cutting edge of technological architecture. Then Pritzker went with that, also Norman Foster, and it went to Ram Koolhaas and famous birdcage architecture authors Jacques Herzog and Pierre Demuron. And following that, as far as the gossip goes, Pritzker was considering Jeffrey Bawa very strongly, but Jeffrey Bawa has got the Aga Khan Chairman's Award, and Glenn Murcutt is a very modest architect doing very small structures with tremendous elegance and care, has got the award. And then Pritzker again worried that they would lose Jørn Utzon. He got the award. And I always happen to be on the advisory board to suggest names and that. And I wrote a very strong letter, not very strong, but a letter, a sincere letter, but strong, that Pritzker was a men's club, as they did not recognize Dennis Scott Brown, and no female architects were there. And in fact, I listed very good architects, and who accomplished. I gave them a list of 6, 7 architects who were not less than any Pritzker winners. I had a letter from the Pritzker secretariat from Mr. Brown, Carter Brown. It was like a slap, very sincere, said, Suha, we do not give this award to the gender, we gave it to the talent. And they gave it to the talent. And that year, Zaha Hadid got the Pritzker Prize in St. Petersburg. And it went on, and more outspoken architects in the American scene. Tom Main has got the award. Then in the ceremony in Istanbul, Mendes de Rocha has got it. Then it was the turn of Mr. Richard Rogers, and following that, Jean Nouvel has got it. So as you can see, it is more or less spanning the whole fame of architectural accomplishments and validating people's history, but there is no critical discourse. I mean, we should think about that. And it is more of a celebration and very elegant ceremonies. I had been to 7 of them, and extremely well orchestrated, well done. And it is good for architecture. And also, someone like Peter Zumthor, who was discovered more or less by the world of architecture in mid or early 1990s, he also got his award at the Pritzker level very, very soon. And Sejima and Nishizawa, the Sana architects, they also have been recognized as a team. And then this is wrong. This is not Wangshu building. I'm sorry, that slide is. But Wangshu, with the Chinese architect who mainly recycles materials and whatever, and he has got it. The slide doesn't belong to him. And Toyo Ito in the following year has got it. And then we had Shigeru Ban, where the line of Japanese architectural accomplishments were there. And then this year, we had, again, a very well-deserved award by Fry Otto. He was the sort of inventor and the leader of the tensile structures, and he had signed for many good historic buildings. And parallel to that, our apex organization, International Union of Architects, also established an award, a gold medal, first issued in 1984 and given to Hassan Fatih. I think very well deserved, and it had tremendous applause for Hassan Fatih, whom I discovered in 1970 when I invited him to Turkey. Nobody knew who he was, and here you see Hassan Fatih and myself in Cappadocia in 1972, it must be. And following that, Reima Pietela got the award. UIA awards have a sort of different structure, and it can be questioned because the nominations were done by the chapters. So the chapters always think that whoever is in the line of, it becomes bureaucratized. So sometimes the award is given, you have to search who this person was and what he has accomplished. And Pietela, unfortunately, was not at the level of Hassan Fatih or Charles Correa, whom we all knew and we all subscribed to their mission and discourse. And following that, Reima Pietela has, sorry, wrong button, Fumihiko Maki has got the award. And following Maki, Rafael Muneo of Spain for again his contextual architecture has got it. A person who has been sort of avoided by the Pritzker Prize, like Charles Correa, because he deserves to be a Pritzker winner with his very sophisticated regional and creative architecture, Ricardo Legoretta. But Ricardo has always been in the jury of the Pritzker Prize, so he couldn't give the award to himself. And the International Union has recognized him. Then Renzo Piano comes. As you can see, there are footsteps of the Pritzker Award, more or less echoing in the International Union of Architects selection. And of course, again, as I said, Theodore Gonzalez has been a sort of brutalist architect known by very few, but by winning the UIA award, he got a sort of different audience and different world of recognition. And recently, last year, IMP has got the award. And these are the awards for architects, frankly, not for architecture. You have to study the architect's work and then make your own conclusions in order to understand why that person is put on the pedestal and saluted. Whereas issue-based architectural awards came basically after 1980. And I don't know whether it would be braggish or pompous and whatever, but Aga Khan Award for Architecture has always been issue-oriented. It recognizes the architect, recognizes the client, recognizes the even contractor or the craftsman, but the award is given to a project. So project has the message. Whereas in Pritzker and UIA, you celebrate a person, and you cannot guarantee what that person does after, and or that person's work cannot be unanimously good and exemplary and last forever. And Aga Khan Award has opened an avenue for this issue-based, project-based awarding and giving a very wide spectrum of concerns and accomplishments. It was followed up by Cityscape Awards, which I was instrumental in establishment, and then World Architecture Community Awards, which is, you may know, my website, and it is running since 2009, and it's among the most popular. And World Architecture Festival Awards, they also given to 26 branches of buildings, and there is one sort of building of the year that's called, identified by super jury, and I had also worked with that. So we, of course, cannot obviously go through all these awards and all these buildings. Only Aga Khan Award has about 120 winning projects, the others multiples of that. But I did something which would be meaningful. One of them is the environment which is very dear to our hearts since the very beginning of our lives. The other one is the environment which we damage most. So I shall first go through the winning projects of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, and then I'll be presenting you some of the schools which were found significant by the Aga Khan juries. And Wadi Hanifa wetlands, I had been following this happening over years. And there was some kind of a documentation by Richard Böteker, who we are going to see his projects later. And this is the discharge of the half-treated water and perhaps untreated water into the desert. So municipality of Riyadh thought that, they could disappear in the sand and no harm would be. It was not like that. And there was impervious stratum of the landscape, and the water was contained. How much? Almost 170 kilometers. And that turned into a new induced oasis of some sort. It was a continuation of a landscape which was water discharged, water first of course desalinated, used and discharged from the Riyadh city. An unbelievable happening because what you see is a regeneration of nature by itself. Birds started to come, new species came, and water, as it flew through that, disinfected itself. It became more purer and purer because the sun was very heavy hitting and there were species absorbing. And it turned out to almost a paradise. And I brought this to Aga Khan juries. They said, no, sir, there is no design factor. This is serendipity. This is by chance. We cannot give an award by anything that happened by chance. And it remained in the agenda, but this kind of happening, a new landscape in the middle of the desert, remained totally unnoticed. And people, of course, started to do picnic there, and even the land around that went into serious speculation. There were, new developments and villas happening there because it was a nice green area. And the drama and the weekend attraction of this area remained over a decade or so. But they must have heard about this jury wanted to have some landscape design input to that, and Riyadh Development Authority appointed their architect, Canadian architect Moriyama Associates, and they, I think, very nicely manicured the environment with the proper walls and walkways and some structures, some stepping stones, as if they were some kind of sculptural elements. And the whole thing has become an environment from the hands of the architect and landscape designers to this extent. And eventually, it has got the Aga Khan Award for architecture. And of course, when it has got the Aga Khan Award, some people said that, Suha, why did you wait until the land around that was speculated? Was that the idea? That was, of course, not true, but it happened. It became a very precious area just out of natural happening. Very widely used by, especially by families, and Riyadh is getting, denser and denser in urban structures, and this area is becoming very important. Of course, there are some kind of a Disney-ish element here and there, but thank God that they were done in natural materials, and people enjoy the existence and drama of these. The other project that I was going to mention was planner Himanshu Parikh's is a civil engineer in indoor city development area. Indoor was a slum of the worst kind, and of course all kinds of generic problems from an environment like that were there. And Himanshu and his team, they thought that if the natural waterways can be reinstated, opened, and the city would be left to the forces of nature to clean it up, like in monsoons and in the rain and whatever, that could be a livable environment. And they did that, and they also persuaded people to participate. And in that process, they realized that people always had some money, but they did not trust the environment, the city environment. But when they had they were encouraged to do so, they immediately invested into their own sort of realm and improved it. You can see, befores and afters here and there, and then you see some public walkways, and the end product is the contained water in the form of a lake, and there is a fountain of oxygenation through that all the time. So the whole environment was transformed, not with public money or any injection, just encouraging people that by making use of the natural forces in the cityscape, they could improve the living conditions, and people invested into their own houses. So this had become livable, and in early 1990s, when this project got the award, there was a new development in Central Asia. They were, for the first time, faced with the reality of squatter type of settlements, and they called these people to address their problem. What could we do? Because in the Soviet regime, there's no possibility of squatters. You could not move from any city to other. The squatters is a byproduct of liberty or liberation, and this is how the urban life goes on in the area. The other project, which was in a minuscule scale, very important, by architect Halim Abdul Halim, he was given a small piece of land in the heart of Cairo to turned into a children's park. And the children's entertainment was changing. You know, it is not no longer they were just using the swings and tunnels and whatever, but they were using, you know, laptops, computers, and things like that, or other types of entertainment devices. And Abdul Halim defined the park as a successive of spaces. In the end, there were either congregational spaces or spaces to play. And also, in order to bring revenue, he had this one side of the park street. He gave it to a more rentable or lucrative activities. He had the shops for the craftsmen so that kids would look at the craftsmen and learn various crafts there. And also he used the composition of the park in order to explain how the historic architecture is decomposed, what are its components and whatever. So he left almost every building unfinished so that kids, when they walk through, they look at Ibn Tulun at the end or Sultan Hassan at the end, but they decipher it with the technology of building in stone. So he had a very sort of well-defined message, but given in a very sweet form like this. You know, you look at the historic thing and you understand how its structure is made. It's a basic architectural course in stone building. And of course, you explore the spaces and made out of stone. And even though it was a very, very small accomplishment and in scale, but it had a particular influence or existence in the urban life. Here you see various forms of decomposition of the building in stone and the explanation of the various components by wooden structures in between. And the other project, Bagh-e Ferdowsi, is in Tehran. You may know is one of the most suffocated city. You know, it is worse than any other place. The traffic is unbelievable. And there are no vast parks and very intensely built, and the pollution and the noise is unbelievable. And there is a mountain landscape next to the city, Elbruz Mountains. It just comes almost, its skirts become Tehran and goes on. And they started a landscaping project by walkways. And especially in the most suppressive, this is city of Tehran, this is the park you can see on the left. Even when the most oppressive political atmospheres in Iran, people found some kind of liberty for getting away from the city, interacting with nature, and in many cases interacting with each other. You know, that was the sort of area of family gatherings, friendship. And it is a rather hard landscape because it's very steep, but the natural materials and many natural forms have been reinterpreted by the sculptors and architects to turn it into a different setting. So it was very interesting to see, you know, the youth, boys and girls together, you know, sometimes holding hands and discussing their future. And it was an area of urban existence. And there were also some pavilions where you can get your tea or coffee. And these, each pavilion was refers to a region. And this is a massive reforestation project from the university where I first graduated. And the government has given a land for a new university to be built as an English language university. And Charles Abrams, the famous planner, had seen the shanty towns growing in northern Africa, in Turkey, and in Egypt. And he said that, you know, there should be institutions to cope with these. And he proposed a university to cope with the problems of development, either in Cairo or Beirut or in Ankara. And the government at that time was intelligent. They gave an area which was larger than the city of Ankara. Huge, you know, tens of thousands of hectares of land. And the person who was the first or the second president of the university, he started a massive non-irrigated forestry program. And I personally have about 500 trees that I planted all through my studenthood and the teaching career. And everyone has that kind of an history. Actually, planting is just made easy. You know, they already dug the hole and put the shovel next to it, and the plant is there. All you do is that you put the plant into the hole and cover it up and say that here I did, you know, I planted a tree. And wonderful feeling, and especially in winter months, we had these campaigns to visit. And Aga Khan, these are the area where the dormitories are. Aga Khan Award was given to this project, especially the biodiversity of the area was kept, and the academic park was not particularly the objective, but the natural part of it, the forestation was given. And I am not daring to show you what these places are now. And they all are inhabited with horrors of buildings, unbelievable condition, but the university's land remains untouched. And it has a lake, and we have boat races there. It's 5 kilometers long in the area, and it is a sort of greenish color, which is, as you see, it is natural. It's rather dense from the point of view of the planktons, but it is growing. And Charles Jenks in the jury protected this project very much, and many jury members said that there is no design here, you know, this is reforestation, and like in the other project. And Charles said that, what do you mean? This is a design at the grand scale, at the city scale. And he even threatened the jury members, if they drop this one, he will drop the jury and whatever. And that is how it has got the award. And another landscaping project, which is rather interesting, you might have noticed that. This is from the architects of the Paris airport, you know, Paul Andrew and his team. They had a novel idea of having landscaped courtyards on the air side. Usually, you know, you have landscapes and the sort of pleasant environment, then you go through the customs or the check-in, then you have completely different synthetic environment. And Paul Andrew thought that this should not be done in the tropics, and persuaded his client. So as you can see, there are many courtyards at the points where you just jump on the plane and the air side, and it becomes a very, very pleasant experience when you go through these areas, always surrounded by the green and the courtyards, and a novel airport experience that one very much enjoys it. This is one of the main fingers leading to the pavilions for checking in, for going into the plane and getting down the plane. It is not the same experience when you come down. That would be my criticism, because you go from the under tunnels, because arrival and departure is not treated equally, but departing is very sort of nice experience with the tropical landscape. This is a project which is extremely interesting. I mentioned Rihad Bodeker as the person who did it. And there was a Saudi client on the Riyadh Development Authority, and the Saudi client wanted to have something novel in this area, something novel but in peace with nature. He had a couple of strong ideas. He said that you cannot stop desert sand or dust by putting grass all over the place. It's not sustainable. You can only stop it by sustainable vegetation, if you can, or by rocks. And he had this vision, and he had the landscape architect Bodeker. And Bodeker came to Riyadh Development Authority. He had a theorem. He said that plants don't die. And he said that, or he asserted that, there should be some plants which survived during the desertification of tens or thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. If we could survive those or revive those plants and then proliferate them and plant them, then we will have a sustainable landscape. It's like a story, isn't it? And, but they went into that. They sieved through tens of tons of desert sand into the finest grain of dust. Then they put them into incubators, and from those incubators, they realized that there were, I think, more than 150 species that survived or revived, came into happening. And they proliferated those, and they used those plants for the extensive landscaping areas. Extensive landscaping areas means that among the stones where some kind of humidity can be contained, and around the vast areas that need landscaping. And then they use the recycled water for the places where more intensive use and interaction would be possible. So they did not deny the fact that intensive and extensive landscapes should be together, but they could be separated and coexist. And here you see these are all areas, well watered, irrigated, and used for more comfortable picnic settings. And the other project is perhaps just the opposite of this one. In the Riyadh landscaping, we are talking about the vast area of spread of land to be sort of consolidated and kept. And here the idea of oasis prevailed. You can see one continuous wall is the building. And inside that wall, it's like an oasis, very intense use of landscaping, and that creates a microclimate, and the whole courtyard is a very pleasant environment all throughout the year, but the rest of the landscape left untouched as far as the main landscaping that I previously mentioned goes. And the sporting areas and congregations were done with friottos, whom we mentioned in the Pritzker Award, tents projecting out, and that celebrates mainly the outside environment. And here you see one of the sections. Here you see one of the friottos tents leading to the main courtyard, the oasis area. And here one of the tents projecting out for a congregational space. And here some of the terraces of the building that you have seen. So it has, as a whole, one very simple idea. And I know the early versions of the project, it was like rectilinear, doing this. And in the end, they sort of softened it up and surrounded the building with one massive structure. And it was done by a group called Saudi group, Omraniye, as the architects of that. And then second group of buildings are schools. Kazi, tell me, is it too much? Can you take 6, 7 schools or more? Negotiate. Okay. Whoever is bored can go to sleep or leave the room. I won't be offended, okay? Because I wanted to put many things into the same basket, and that is done with goodwill, not to bore you. This is perhaps the best, I would say, project that Aga Khan Award has ever given, because this is the son of the village leader, Gando, Francis Kere, who, being privileged from the village, studied in Germany with a very respectful environmentalist and development specialist person, Peter Herle, whom we should probably involve with the institute in the future. And then he said that his life has changed due to education. So he wanted to spend his wealth and energy for education. He built a very simple school. The school has just 3 classrooms, and the space in between, you can see, is both for the access and breaks from the classes. And the roof is very interesting. It's a steel roof. Of course, it's very noisy. So in order to make it less noisy, they insulated the ceiling below, as you can see, and left the corrugated steel structure on top, and they let the air flow through that to make it cooler. They also lifted up the foundation in order to protect the building from the flash floods, which are particularly frequent there. And here is the structure of the roof. They had, of course, no engineers to calculate, so they built one module and got on top of it and stamped, and they realized it didn't collapse, so they could build it with that. Or when they realized it would collapse, they reinforced it. So it is all pragmatic, experimental kind of thing. But as a whole, I think it is very functional, but at the same time, rather elegant with its simplicity. And they also give classes on the vegetation and the environmental concerns and whatever, and that is just by the side of the school. And Sidi Al Alawi Primary School, this person is Samir Hamaisi with Denis Lassagne. Samir Hamaisi was the youngest person, there are students here, who got the Aga Khan Award. He was at the age of 28 when he got the award. And it was a simple mission of reaction. In the old city of Tunis, they wanted to build a standard school building, which government provides. And the Association of the Protection of the Area said that this would be criminal. I mean, we should do something which is contextually relevant. And they described what they would want. And it had, from 1983 awards, there was a project that was also premiated by the Aga Khan Award. And they put the project in front of their architect, and to the best of his talent, he designed a very simple school with just a courtyard and walkways and classrooms. And again, the simplicity of the school building, and it is contextual standing with the old city of, this is the plan, of Tunis, was very much appreciated. As you can see, there are 8 plus 8, 16 classrooms altogether. And it has all the features of the architecture of northern Africa. These are Hamaisi's drawings. And I do not know, in what state this is, because this is now one of the first war zones in Syria recently, unfortunately. And Raif Mohanna was, he may still be, the state architect. He was heading a company which did projects on behalf of the government. And he had the architecture dictum of Hassan Fethi. You don't build on the site, you build off the site. So this area had unbelievable quantities of volcanic stones. He devised a technology to build with that stone schools in the form of independent pavilions, so that they do not compose a massive whole, but they are sort of fragmented, distributed, and organized around the courtyards. And 3 of these prototype projects were executed when I visited them in 2001 and 2002. And they, of course, stand very dramatic on the landscape. Even if they didn't have the white stucco, you would not even notice that they even existed there. They're so well adapted to the landscape. And also, they have proven that it was much, much cheaper than anything else that could be brought in. And they did not call it a particular school. They had a school planning and building system, as they have named the project, so that it could be repeated in many places. This one is very familiar to you. Anna Heringer's project, which got the Aga Khan Award, and that is also an exercise with the material that's abundant and cheap, how to do simple structures with this material. And planning is very simple. You have the sort of rather creative or imaginary playrooms at the back and classrooms in the front. And these are small kids, they crawl and walk like that. And Anna and his team, they had the local source and the volunteers they were both teaching them how to construct with bamboo and mud brick, and also show them how firm it could get. And of course, here you see the testing of the beams, not unlike the Gando thing, and it is a simple live load on the beam and see how strong it is. And there are many dramatic architectural pictures of that, and these are all for the literature of architecture, which everyone has fallen in love with this project, because they're very dramatically photographed as the light sort of comes in, and the kids' belongings are there, and this is the main sort of playground, and then how the natural environment and the light has been controlled and brought in. And here you see the structure to the upper level. And most interesting is these holes leading to the play space at the back. And here you see how they use that area. And Bridge School is a political and a social phenomenon. It is the story of a village, actually two villages next to each other. They had been enemies for centuries. And there's a little valley between them. They just hated each other, and animosity was at the extreme. And an agreement was put between them. This is the old structure of the old village. This is the beginning of the school. They decided to build school for both sides in the form of a bridge, so that they would compulsorily interact and go from one village to the other and become friends in time. So everyone claims that that worked, because this bridge not only connected two sides of the valley, but brought the culture and education together. And you can see it is done in a very simple structure, mainly tensile and compressive elements are there in their most simplest functional existence, and the spaces are also the same. Here you see the procession from one village up to the level and going to the other one. And this is another aspect of the same thing that I showed you. And the end is also the beginning from the other side, like any other bridge, you know. It never stops. And what it had addressed socially was also reinforced by the architectural simplicity, and one end of the school was used as the stage for the theater, for concerts and whatever. There's a sort of multifunctional existence of that. Here you see the stage again, and this is the entrance from the other end. And at the background is the oldest structure in the place. And this is a very interesting project in the 1990s. This is the French Center in Kaolack in Senegal. Architect is an anthropologist, actually, a social scientist. He had he was particularly interested in addressing the forms that are sympathetic to the people, and the forms and the colors that people themselves used it to in order to accommodate a French school in African setting. So you will ask me, what is the material for these? And you won't believe it. It is drain pipes, PVC pipes. And without any hesitation, he used the regular drain pipes to put the structures in various forms, and he let the people to paint them so that they would feel a part of it. Because coming institution is the French institution, is in any case is rather foreign. And then he had the monochromatic places. Then he let the people to express themselves, and it is a kind of architectural intervention, but at the same time a cultural bridge to express. I'm going fast, don't worry. Every lecture I give, the slides remain with the hosting institution. They are yours, so you can use it as many times as you like. And this is the last project, and Jafar Tukan, whom we lost a couple of months ago, one of the leading architects of Jordan, but he was doing many commercial things, many sort of office blocks and commercial buildings. But with this SOS village, he has changes to tone of approach. SOS village, is the Austrian concept. It is not a school, but a home for the homeless kids. So there are foster mothers, and foster mothers take care of them as if they call the foster mother, and the environment has to be as soft, as humane, as welcoming as possible. And Jafar used local stone from the Aqaba area, and he introduced some precast lentils and things like that. And he had probably left his mark with this building than anything else. And then as a final project, we have foster partners, and they address the tropical climate with the highest possible technology. They had a huge canopy connecting various offices, classrooms, and auditoria, and casting a vast shadow, as you can see, on the landscape, allowing the ventilation, without compromising in any form from the technological attitude that the practice has. And they have always been in line with the high technology. And it is a vast congregation, it is a vast congregation possibility. And every architectural aspect is more or less a product of highest possible technology. And thanks.